Thanks for tuning in to the Pace Performance Podcast. So today I am speaking to Lorena Torres. So welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much for coming on. So we spoke a little while ago with Sophia and Brian. So thank you for coming back on. So we're going to stay away from that topic a little bit, but we'll touch on it right at the start. But anyone that doesn't know who you are, do you just want to give us a bit of a background on yourself, education-wise, and what you're doing at the 76ers?
Okay, yes. So I'm the performance director of the 76ers now. I've been here with the team for a year. My former team was the San Antonio Spurs, another NBA team. I was with them for 4 years, and previous to that, I was in Spain. I'm from Spain, as you can see by the accent. My background is I am a strength coach, a sports scientist. I've worked with different athletes, different sports, golf, tennis, with the national swimming team. But I've always been linked to the academia. So I was working partial time as a teacher, I always try to do research, stay connected with people, do research. So I like to define myself as in between the research academia field and the applied field, working with athletes. And that's my journey, quick sum up, and now I'm with basketball.
Perfect. One thing I do want to touch on that we spoke about with Brian and Sophia was that transition from Spain to the US and the circumstances that occurred around that change. Do you just want to give us a bit of an insight into that, because people may not have listened to the episode, and I think it's really pertinent, especially for up and coming, especially female SNCs, to hear that story. Then we can have a little chat around that.
Yeah, for sure. I think in my personal case, it was a combination of things. Being a professional in elite or the pro sports in Spain is difficult just because of the context of the country. So added to that is the fact that I'm a woman, and the equality of opportunities, I think, in my opinion, is not the same. So 6 years ago, I had to decide, what am I going to do? I'm going to still working. I have to have 3 jobs to be able to pay the bills, or do I want to give a chance to be in a professional environment? So I decide the context and the circumstances allow me to come to the States. And that was a transition. The reasons why, as I say, the combination of professional opportunities in my country and the fact that I was working for a professional team there. And as I say in the podcast, when they told me, well, it's going to be a challenge for you to be with senior teams, first teams, professional teams, because the fact that you're a woman, and how the athletes are going to see that, and how you're going to be integrated in that environment. For example, you in a locker room, or you know. So it was very, very challenging, and I decided I want to try anyway, so I'm going to try somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. So what was it about the Spurs that made that a completely different scenario? Obviously, welcoming a woman S&C coach, sports scientist into the organization. Was there anything structurally different within the organization, like more women in top jobs? What was the difference?
I think it's a matter of the culture of the organization. I don't think it's the sport. I'm not sure if the NBA is as open and integrative and giving equal opportunities everywhere. But I've been lucky to work in 2 organizations here in the NBA that are very open-minded, and they embrace the fact that equality, and not only the gender, but the social status, or so they are very, very open-minded. So for me, the transition there as a woman was easy, because I wasn't being seen as a woman in the organization. So yeah, the equality of opportunities in the 2 organizations that I've been, or I am in the States, have been smooth and easy, and facilitating all the steps.
Mm-hmm. Is there any high profile females at the women at the 76ers, like in the general manager or anything like that?
Yes.
Apologies for my naivety when it comes to this kind of thing.
No, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
No, yes, especially this organization is very progressive. I don't know exactly the numbers, but I think we're at the forefront of having females in leadership position and manager positions. So yes, now these organizations are very progressive, and it's not only progressive, it's supporting. So making sure that we are seen and listened, and we are recognized as a woman and leaders and in management positions. Yeah.
Do you think it's clearly a different situation from Spain to the US, and your experience has obviously been really good in the US, but do you think that experience for women in strength and conditioning is improving across the board?
Well, I don't know all the leagues now in Europe. I don't follow them that closely, but I think I would ask these questions to the people that maybe is listening and they are working in Premier League or Spanish leagues or, German leagues. I would say, do you see women around you? Do you have female strength coaches working with you, sports scientists, females working with you? Do you have a woman that is your boss or is your supervisor? So I'm not completely sure about the current situation. What I can say is I don't see in the news or the social media, or I don't see that, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So I invite the people that is listening to think about, okay, in my context, in my team, in my organization, if we're 100 people, which is the percentage of women? And why is that?
Mm-hmm. I like it. Put it back on the people that are listening.
Yeah.
Good. One thing that hasn't come up surprisingly a lot in previous podcasts is high intensity interval training, conditioning, however you want to term it. And that's something that I'd like to dive into with you if possible. And one logical place to start, maybe your philosophy around high intensity interval training for the athletes that you work with, or maybe a bit more globally. Would you be able to go into that for us? And we can use that as a bit of a jumping off point to dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah, sure. We were lucky to collaborate in Martin St. Paul's book, in the high intensity, like the HIIT book, and I think we present there pretty clear framework about our philosophy and paradigm of how I see conditioning training, especially in basketball. Since then, I've been thinking a lot. And the more experience you have, the more you question your methods and that happens to me, how to get better. And I think the conditional training or the strength training starts with a deep analysis of the sport. And which is more interesting for me now is the constant analysis of the sport. So the way I would train conditioning 5 or 10 years ago or 3 years ago is different now, because I have more information, I've run more studies, I've been able to analyze the new resources of information. So I think the key point is constantly explore what is happening in your sport and how it's changing and how the rules are changing your sport, and go from there. So I'm a foodie. I like food. I like to go to restaurants. And one of the things that I like is to extrapolate something with the food. So when now some chefs, what they do is they have a dish that is a traditional dish. They deconstruct the dish and they put it together again in a different, more innovative and fashion and creative way. So I like to do that with the sport now. What the sport that I'm currently working on looks like, how can I deconstruct it to work different pieces of it to make them better, and then put everything together to deliver a better product. So for example, that's why I think time series analysis, like the worst case scenario, rolling average, peak demands, analyzing the game by the whole game, halves, quarter, 5 minutes, 3 minutes rolling averages is becoming more and more popular in team sports, because now we understand the average distance or the total distance run in a quarter or a game is not giving us information to knowing what is happening with the athletes and how are we going to help the athletes and players to prepare better. So that's the framework, the long explanation. How do you translate that to practice? So I think you really have to work on the way I see my sport is what's the minimum that the athletes have to have, which is completely different than other big field team sports. We are in a smaller field, so we don't have to reach max speed as other team sports, and we don't run kilometers, like 12 kilometers other sports. So for me, what's the minimum aerobic capacity that you have to be able to perform in a game at your maximum performance and through the season. So what's the minimum? And then how are we gonna work in the more anaerobic neuromuscular demands? So high intensity interval training, seeing as a progression of now we're gonna run 20 minutes. When you are okay in 20 minutes, we're gonna go to 10 minutes, and then you're gonna go to the 5 minutes, 3 minutes, working in between with short interval training or high speed training. That doesn't clearly work for us, I think, unless you have an injured player and he can be on the court. So for me, it's more, what's the minimum? Let's guarantee that you can play a basketball game, which is pretty easy at this level. And then let's make sure that you're going to be prepared for the worst case scenario, peak demands, anaerobic demands. So to do that, I think a good way is doing it on court. And again, unless you have an injured player that has to do a return to play and return to performance, to me, the best way to be in shape in basketball is playing basketball. And how you manipulate the drills, the time, the people, the space is the beauty of the training and the art of the training, with the information and the evidence-based information to support those decisions. Super long answer.
Great answer. Love it. Great answer. So when it comes to that analysis of the sport, there's the sport, but there's also different teams in the sport and different ways people play and how they are wanting to do things tactically over rather than technically. How do you go about analysing, yes, the sport, but then the actual group that you're working with? Is there a lot of waiting and seeing and just trying to understand and doing your own internal research, or is it still very much peer reviewed what's out there in terms of basketball as a whole?
Great question, great point. And that's what I was saying. You need a minimum so the athletes can perform from the coach, and the coach plays the way he wants. So I obviously read and like to see what it's out there and what my colleagues are doing research-wise. But I like to spend a lot of time doing internal research, because not only every team plays different or have a style, as you said, but in each team you have different player profiles, different playing styles. So to me, what is important is what physical demands means for that player. So you have a player that his playing style is just run in the court, go through the rim, super aggressive, super explosive, but then he's gonna walk, rest, he managed that work to rest ratio in a way. When you have other guys that they jog, but they have a lot of contact on the post, and so maybe you still need the conditioning, but it's, to your point, is yes, you always have to keep in mind what's the playing style of your coach and the philosophy, tactically the philosophy, and what's the playing style of your player to help them to prepare to that. Because it's not fair. What I found is when you go and a coach asks you, did this player work hard this practice or this game? And you only have accels, decels, high intensity, distance, which is most of the metrics reported in the literature, it's super hard to say, no, he didn't, when everybody in the room knows he was fighting in the post heavily. So I think we have to have this critical thinking process and find ways to analyze what physical means for different playing styles. And that's what I'm enjoying a lot the last couple of years.
So when a coach does ask something like that, how are you able to, from the data that you collect, and we'll come on to that a little bit later on in terms of the sports tech, but what data are you able to collect that gives him the answer that he wants, which is basically a yes or a no, and then maybe a scale or a percentage or something like that? How can you answer that for him?
Well, it's challenging because then we come to technology.
Yep.
And we're very, even if technology is like, you know, that I love technology and talk about technology and technology implementation, but at the same time, I think we're still far from what we need. So it's a challenge because at least in my sport, we have one type of technology when we practice and a completely different technology when we play. And it's completely different. It's not similar just because it's positioned like indoor systems like lock and position systems, you still have a spatial data, but the angles, how far the anchors or the antennas or the cameras are is completely different. So the algorithms, the filtering, like it's completely different. You can have 2 miles run for more or less the same type of activity in a practice and for a game when you translate that. So it's a challenge. So what I think is very, very important in my sport is game data, because we play so much. We play almost every other day. So what I do is I use the information that I can get from the game data, which is optical tracking systems, 2D. And it's challenging because with that, you don't have contact, you don't have collisions, you don't have isometric information, you don't have energy expenditure. So you only have a 2D data. So if a coach, to your point, if a coach asks how physically demanding or how hard we worked last night, it's challenging today. So what I'm trying to do is what you just said, like the internal research, how we can find ways to merge physical information with basketball information to try to answer those questions. Because I do not have a number for collisions or impacts or fighting or contact, but we do have in a certain way, like when they're playing the post up, or when they are in the rim, or when they are close to a player or not. So I think what is going to be next, at least in my sport, and I think in team sports, is merging tactical and physical information to be able to answer better those questions. Now I'm trying, but I'm completely aware it has to be better.
Just going back to the conditioning stuff, and you mentioned about doing the conditioning by playing basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you communicating with the coach to make sure that technical and tactical outcomes are met, but also the physical outcomes are also met, which I guess is the holy grail of any strength and conditioning coach working closely with a technical coach. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, I don't know in other team sports. I think in other team sports, they have more room to manipulate the training drills and practice, managing constraints such as space, number of players, rules. Now you have more opponents, but based on what I've read from soccer. I'm from Spain, so I try to read what my colleagues there are doing. In our case, in my experience in this sport in this country, I think the way we can support better coaches is giving them parameters, cues about how to make sure that the conditioning that we are looking for is reached, giving them more the freedom of choosing the basketball context. With that, I mean, if we have players that doesn't play at all, or if you have players that doesn't play at all or play less because they're younger or they are not in the rotation, I think the key is guarantee that those players have enough exposure to be ready if they have to play. So when you prepare those type of sessions, I think you have to know, again, which are the game demands for a profile similar to them, and how you prepare the drills to do that. And I really believe that in my sport, 5-on-5, pickup games, 3-on-3, you can reach those needs. Actually, you can go super maximal, because if you have a player that it's going to be in the rotation 5 or 10 minutes, which is this for him, like this level for him, for the people that is not seeing the video, is like a minimum. How we do prepare him to make sure that if he has to jump for 20 or 40 minutes in a game, he's going to be able to perform. So to do that, you communicate to coaches, hey, I need this from a time intensity word to rest ratio perspective. Now, if you have to put that player in situations where has to do more defense or offense or threes, that's on you. So for me, the way I think I can help better coaches is, this is what I think is going to work from a physical perspective: volume, intensity, density. And then talk to the coaches which are the skills that you want to promote in this session. For example, offense usually is more linear. Even basketball is not a linear sport, while defense is more lateral or horizontal, change of direction, more neuromuscular demanding. So how we can help to put the players in those situations to guarantee that you're going to get what you want from basketball, and I'm going to get what I need from a cardiovascular, neuromuscular perspective.
I don't want to make you say things that we're talking about the team. However, do you have, or in the past, have you had like groups? So you've got the guys that are very much on the periphery, but we need to make sure they're the worst case scenario, they need to step up. Then you've got that kind of middle group that are maybe going to come in, maybe going to come out, and you've got the, like you say, the rotation. How do you then work with each of them groups? It may be 3 or 4 different groups to make sure they're ready to step up to the next group. Should they need to, make that happen?
Yeah, I think in the chapter we present this. We have a cut off time in basketball, just based on the studies that we have done, and seems that if you play between 15 and 20 minutes, like regularly, you're still maintaining that minimum threshold that I was talking. If you play 20, 25 plus 30 minutes, the whole programmation is about managing recovery. The tricky ones and the fun ones are when you place them less than those 10 minutes. So yeah, to your point, I think you could split the group in 3 groups. One is going to be more focused on recovery, the other one is going to be maintenance and recovery, and the other one is going to be how to make sure that we provide that environment to make sure that the worst case scenario. So yeah, having that clusters of group of type of minutes, it's important. Then you have the individuals. So you can have a vet, like a 30-plus-year-old guy playing 10. Probably that player doesn't need exactly the same type of drill that a 20-year-old player playing 5 minutes or less. So I think what you have to do, to your point, to your question, is have a set of rules to be able to make those decisions. So playing time is going to be one, player style is going to be another one, age, player needs, and then with those set of rules, how you manipulate the conditioning training.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. Moving on to sports tech, something that I know you've already mentioned. It's a passion of yours. Where did that interest come from, Lorena? I know there's obviously loads of great work coming out of Spain and has done for a long time. Was that where that was born out of?
Yes, yeah. And I'm glad you asked this question, because I think we have amazing professionals in Spain, super good. Our weakness is the language. Okay. If we could speak English, we would be everywhere. No, I think, to your question, I think my passion started when I was in college. I had great mentors. I think we have in Spain amazing professionals. they have stayed in the country, but they encourage us to use tech. So I think my mentors encourage us, or my generation, to have objective information and monitoring training, because if you have information, you can have a process of being critical with yourself. It's what I'm doing working, or the way I think it's working. So when I was 20 years old, they were showing us linear encoders. Now that linear encoders, how to track with a radar, things that now are in the research, like coming up as well. I have done this 20 years ago. The problem is that we didn't publish in Spain. So to your question, my passion started in Spain when I was studying, having great mentors that promote objectivity, monitoring, collecting data, analyzing data, critical thinking, be critical with yourself and your methods. So it started in Spain. And from there, I guess it's a combination of that I like it. And I've always been very, very interested in technology. My PhD was about monitoring training and velocity-based training, because we had the technology. And I was super lucky to have as a supervisor Juan Jose González Vadillo, one of the main brains for velocity-based training. So again, I think was key to have great mentors and people that encourage you to put yourself in those environments. And from there, I've been always passionate about monitoring and collecting data and technology. And now I'm at a stage of my life and career where before I was, oh my God, I have this encoder, I have to use it. And now I'm like, if it doesn't, why? Like, I'm way more critical with technology now.
Nice. So challenges, I'd like to discuss challenges. I think this is always an interesting topic, and just challenges for integrating technology in the processes that go from actually the challenge of buying the thing or making the decision to buy the bit of technology, to actually the challenges to implement it and to get good information from it and actually use it to make decisions. So it'd be good to get your ideas around the challenges kind of globally of sports tech, and then we can maybe go into basketball specifically.
Yeah. So there's it's a paradox, because there's so much technology right now, and at the same time, I think there's so little that really is giving us useful and practical information that we are using to change like decisions. So the first thing is I prefer less, but use the information that comes from that technology. And I'm in an environment now, it wasn't like that in Spain, where we have resources. So people sometimes think that having more technology makes you more innovative and progressive. And I have to spend a lot of time educating people around me. And my philosophy, my vision is, if innovation is a process of do things better, it's not going to be always about technology. In the past, in the history of humanity, technology innovation meant we have tools that makes our lives easier. So instead of eating with your hands, we're going to create a tool that is going to help us to eat, right? But now it's not everything about technology. Technology is part of the innovation process. But system, procedures, exactly what you're saying. How are we going to sell this product and get the buy-in from the athletes to be able to implement the technology and use the information? That's the first thought process. The second one is, I think 10 years ago, the scenario was completely different than now. And now what I'm seeing is athletes and players are more used to technology. We're explaining better why we are using tracking systems and monitoring systems. There's still people that is reticent to use it. But I think my impression is that it's more extended and accepted, at least in my sport. So the buying, if you do it slow and optional at the beginning and you explain the results, you get more and more buying from the athletes. I've seen in my experience athletes that were a completely no, and then they start with the buying with one or two technology, which is a win. And I'm happy, because I think it's just a matter of time. and a good use of the technology to get the buy-in. And it's super, super important that the people that is working with you, for you and you're working for, supports the system. I think the technology implementation is an organizational, it's the whole organization that has to support its implementation.
How do you, so with so much is out there, and players and athletes will be exposed to, well, everyone's exposed to it, whether it's on your phone or it's on a different device, whether it's a ring, whether it's a watch, whether it's something in your head, whatever it may be. How do you, like you say, as an organization, and you may have, as other organizations have a team to looking at technology themselves, but how do you go about filtering that down and filtering the noise to actually get to the point of, okay, I think this is what we need, and this is the potential range of products that we've got to choose from? How does that go from big, everywhere, lots of stuff, to, okay, this is it?
I think the clearer you have the goal, the easier it is. So, for example, now I'm looking for a kinematics system. So the process that I do, and I've done in the past, and for the Spurs was one of my roles there, is what do we need to make our program better? So let's say you choose a topic like sleep tracker. How you say that? Sleep tracking systems.
Yes, that's it.
So okay, I want to track sleep. How do I do it? Let's go for the technology. So the first thing that I do is time consuming, is what is out there, like everything. What is all the devices that are there? Watches, bands, rings, everything. Let's go for everything. Once I have the ones, like I've seen the market, I look for research to see is there any validation, peer review papers using it. Filter to the most important ones. Then I include in my decision process opinions from other colleagues using it. So I reach to people, and you know that I reach people for no opinion because I reach to you. Yeah. So I try to talk to colleagues, people that I completely trust, and hey, have you heard about this? Are you using it? What's the feedback? And then that comes to, okay, you have to choose between 100% of validity, reliability, super scientific, clinical used, and there's no way my players are going to use it. And then the decision making is, okay, what I'm prioritizing for this type of technology. Yep. Sometimes it's going to be evidence, validity, reliability. Sometimes it's going to be, so that's when I try to make the decision. And for certain technologies, my priority is going to be validation, reliability, and for other type of technologies, I'm more flexible. For example, if I have to pick force plates and a software, my priority is going to be reliability, validity, like is the best force plates that I can use. If it's a sleep tracking system, I can be more flexible because not because I don't care about the data, is because I think it's more an educational tool. Shona Halson always says it has to be more about education. Don't get obsessed if your score readiness is 73 today when it should be 75, because it's not about that. It's, are you changing behaviors? Are you improving your sleep patterns, your routines? So I think it's depend, as I said at the beginning, what's the primary goal, why you want to implement that. And then it's when you can decide, what do I compromise?
How do you stop athletes getting influenced by that? They want, like, for, I don't know, X wearable technology, whether it's a watch, whatever it may be, comes up with a score. They see the score. That's not the same. That's a lower score than it was yesterday. Okay, I'm starting to freak out because we've got a game tonight. How do you stop that kind of scenario?
I wish NBA basketball players would use the technology that much in that way. I would love to have to talk to them like, oh my gosh, don't use that. But right now it's more like, what do you think about, we should use something, right?
Okay.
I'm not that. I haven't seen that point yet.
Okay.
Some athletes are like, I've seen some of them, very individual, like individuals that they track those type of things. And I think our role in that situation is education, education, education. The same way that nutrition. So my role now is I'm more in a leadership position, overseeing nutrition, recovery, sports science. So I think we, the professionals, we have the duty to educate, and regardless. So if it's not only about technologies, these trends, and now I want to be vegan, and now I don't want to. So it's okay to go with them, but let's make sure that we explain the pros, cons, and again, the why behind those reasons and how we're going to use the information. So to your point, I think is about education, relationships, building trust, and then explain things.
Is there any process you go through when it comes to education? Maybe upon introducing something for the first time, that you're going through the process of why this is important and just getting them a general understanding. Is there any process that you go through with the athletes during that initial period?
If I think it's building relationships. We are in an industry where relationships are key. So if you work close to the player or the athlete, when I've been working closely to the players, I think it's a matter of relationships and then having conversations. And for example, I love infographics and visuals, and my reporting systems, I hope they are simple and easy to digest. So I use infographics. I send, like a slide with something, trying to explain something. So to your point, I think is visuals and communication and conversations. Now, again, I'm in a role where I'm not the main person in a day-to-day basis to build those type of relationships. My role now is more about the information, communication, visualization, and lead the people that works in the department to do that. So I think it depends on the context, but to your question, my process is relationships, communication, and I'm a big bias person supporter of visuals. So having screens and infographics and sending a text, sending a slide is like when I do sometimes I've shared in social media this type of workout or this type of information. And when I do that, it's because myself, especially with infographics, not the workouts, it's okay, I want to know about beet juice. So I do the whole, okay, let's go again, like the sleep trackers, which are all the beet juice in the market. What's the calories, protein content, carbs content, and then I put it in a visual way for me, or in a way that I think an athlete or a player would understand it, and then I share it. So that's my process. What am I looking for? What's the answer that what's the question that I'm trying to answer? How do I put it in a way that is digestible and easy and quick? Like we are now with Instagram and Twitter and all these super fast type of information, and then communicate, talk. That's the process.
With your changing role and going to more of a leadership role, and it's something that's come up a couple of times in the previous guests I've had very recently. How's that transition been for you? That you're not the person doing the visuals and been very hands-on with the players. You're in that managerial leadership role, empowering these people to be able to do that. What's that transition been like?
It's challenging, especially because I'm a very applied person and I like to be on the field. But it's the same that when I was in the academia or teaching or doing research, I've always believed I can do research and I can talk to the students if I'm not doing it. To me, saying, okay, high intensity interval training, the physiology is this, and then you have to go from this word to this, explaining all the physiology, if you never ever applied it with a player, because then you have I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that, right? So it's the same in this situation. Is personally, I like to be involved because it's the way that I think I can have more impact. But at the same time, you have to support your people to do it. So what I'm trying to do now is, yes, I'm in a leadership position, but at the same time, what I love now is sports science and analysis and technology and innovation and developing a culture. I love all that has to related with the mind. And so now I'm transitioning for a more like, how can I be a better leader and supporter and mentor, while I'm still involved in the day-to-day things.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, just one more thing on sports tech. Inertial sensors and the, I suppose, more emphasis put on the inertial sensors over, I mean, I know you're an indoor sport, but the global, maybe GPS metrics. Just want to talk a little bit about that and where you potentially see that going in that, I suppose, more granular data in basketball?
Well, for me, it's key. I wish we could have IMUs in basketball, because basketball is a sport where, again, I don't think 2D give us 2D is position and time. So you are losing all the impact of the sport in the body. So if you have IMUs, you can have segments differentiation, asymmetries, axles, decels, not coming from the 2D, but the 3D. Forces, with the accelerometer, gyroscope, and magnetometer, you could have way more information about what is happening in the body rather than what is happening in the space. But at the same time, I always push, and they know, technology companies, that it's super hard for us to sell a wearable if it's hard, big, heavy, uncomfortable. So, and it happens. Like you have a guy that falls on the back, hits the hip with the sensor, and is like, I'm not wearing it anymore. You're done. Like, there is super hard to ask that player again, please. It's still giving me good information. So to your question, I think for any sport, we have to work with the technology companies to have better wearables, because what you have in your body is going to give us way more interesting information from me. Dissociation between upper body, lower body, right, left, unilateral movements. Again, axles isn't applied to the body. So I'm a truly believer that we should go in that direction.
How much input would you have on a situation like that? You're working with a sports technology company, and how much, I suppose, do you obviously clearly just don't want a finished product. You're happy at sometimes to work with that company, but how much do you give until you go, okay, now it needs to be right?
So how much I am willing to work with that?
Exactly.
It's a really good question, because the market is,
yes,
for certain technologies, nobody is good.
Yeah.
Like there is not the perfect product, in my opinion. So you compromise what is giving me what I need, as I said before. If we go with one technology, I just try to get the most of them.
Yeah.
The problem is that sometimes they get bigger or more important, or they have more clients and they think it's done. But honestly, experience and time have put some of those companies in like, well, you are not the leader anymore.
Yeah.
So you should start listening to your clients. I love to work with them. I like to think that we are helping them and just develop that relationship. And for the good and for the bad, sometimes you can change because there's nothing better, but sometimes you can. So I think my message for technology companies is listen to your clients, and because at the end of the day, we're going to make the decisions. And let's work together. But another point is, don't be afraid of changing. It's a pain in the ass for us because it's time consuming and you have to build your database again and all that. But again, what do you want the technology for, and what are you willing to compromise?
Superb. So bringing that to an end, that little segment on sports tech, and then moving on to strength and power in team sports, and then maybe a bit of replication from the conditioning side, but your philosophy when it comes to strength and power, then we can have a little chat about what that means to basketball.
Yes. 3 days ago, there has been published a book, and I explain everything, like all my philosophy in 5 pages in a chapter.
What book is this, Lorena?
Medicine and Science in Basketball. Basketball, sports, medicine, and science.
Okay, nice, cool.
I have it here, that's why.
So anyone that hasn't read the book yet, do you want to give us a bit of an insight?
Yes, it's a book. Everything is about basketball. Okay. It's very based in injuries, injury prevention, return to play, specific, like there's a chapter for each type of injury in basketball. And one of the chapters, they ask us to do strength training in basketball. And again, it's kind of the same. I think you have to have a set of rules and processes and go from, the chapter is actually called Strength in Basketball, considering basketball needs and player needs. So that's my thought process. What is basketball about, and what's the individual that you have to work with? When I was starting writing the book, probably a year and a half, the chapter, a year and a half ago, what I did is sat with a coach. Okay. And I said, okay, I have to write a book about strength. And I believe that you have to start with basketball. So guys, what is important for you in basketball from a strength movement perspective? And we had great conversations because it was about, well, we coaches split basketball in offense and defense. So that's, in offense, we work in a certain ways, and in defense, we work in a different ways. And I was like, I never thought about that for a strength program. So which type of, because for me before was about actions of movements, running, changing of direction, jumping, running to jumping, changing of direction to jumping, moving to contact. So it was more about actions and movements in general, considering those actions and movement for basketball. And now it's more like, okay, but what about the turning, spinning, layups? So 2 feet jump, 1 feet jump, in which contact, with an opponent, contested shot, non-contested, with the ball, without the ball. Changing direction with the ball is different than changing direction without the ball. So to your point, I think I would start the strength training framework talking to coaches. Well, that's what I did. So a bit of a paradigm shift, starting with that. Again, basketball actions and movements, based on offense, defense, how we deconstruct the movements. And we have been working this year a lot. That's a project that I really wanted to do. How you go from general movements to specific movements and all the progression. So for, let's say, changing of direction right to right or right to left or left to right, how are the steps backwards? So lunges with multi-plane, multi-directional lunges, to double leg squat or single leg squat, to leg extension, right? So from the movement to the mechanical movement and muscles implied to the muscle, that let's make sure that the quad is strong for the change of direction for the patella. So again, it's a bit of the construction and then putting it together again with a specificity for the basketball movements. And then the player is a vet, is a young player, injury history, minutes play, anthropometry, likes, like you can know that, oh my gosh, single RDL is the best exercise in the world for hamstring injury prevention, and that player hates it. So involve the player in the decision-making of the exercises to get the buy-in. And be very, very, very efficient with the time. If you can do a strength program in 20 minutes, don't do it in 30, at least in my context. My philosophy, I'm a great person in many, many things. So I love Olympic weightlifting and absolutely very functional, specific movements and everything that is in between. Because some players need something at a certain point. So if you come to my program, you're not gonna see only weightlifting. You're not going to see only very specific cable movements, but I hope all the in between it's accepted in the program.
How, going through that process that you've just gone through with talking to the coach, if you hadn't have done that and had maybe have gone down a route that you would have previously, do you think how different was the outcome with the end goal of a program? Was it very different going through that new process of starting with the coach and working that way?
Not, because I've always believed in the specificity and progressions, but again, it was very physical based. Okay, in basketball, you need to contacts, jumps, movements, changes of directions, but it was a step forward in basketball specificity. So I don't think it would be completely different, because my philosophy has never been power per se, like how we improve maximal dynamic strength per se. That's just a tool or a part of the process. But evolving the specificity was always been my philosophy. I just think is a step forward in how we select better exercises.
Mm-hmm. Would different times of the year change things in terms of what the coach wanted from these guys, therefore changing the whole flow of what you end up with in terms of a program?
Yeah, good question. I think in our sport, off season is the perfect time to develop things. Regular season is the perfect time to maintain things. And before the playoffs, if you are in a playoffs team, is to reach like the peaks. It could be seen as an individual sport where you have a long time to prepare things. It's not, because again, in season depends a lot if you're playing or not playing. But whatever so if you have players that are not playing a lot, you still can develop things. So off season or developing or achieving moments of the season, you can do whatever the goal for the players is: hypertrophy, max strength, speed, power. Those type of things are off season is a great time to do that. Or in season with players that doesn't play a lot, or young players, they play and they're gonna have to do it anyways. With more vets, more minutes play guys, I think off season is the same. Is the time to build. In season, maintain, injury prevention, protection of your body, recovery, and those every week, 10 days of strength sessions, even if you're playing, like keep that consistently through the year. And then moving towards the playoffs, speed, power, specificity, because what they do on the court anyways is going to be super specific. So it's not that we need, in my sport, we don't need to work change of direction in the weight room that much, because they're doing it all the time in the individual sessions, team sessions. So in my sport, I think that's the way I would say it.
Last question. Is there any other specific dose timings that you would use? I know you mentioned like max strength every 10 days-ish, like plyos, for example. Is there other modalities that you would make sure you hit at a certain amount of days, no matter if you're playing or not?
It's interesting because plyometrics in basketball is a tricky one. Mm-hmm. During the season, so I think you have to keep in mind two things. You need to keep the players available and healthy, because that's the first goal. But at the same time, you can't protect them too much, because you still need to work. So health and performance go hand by hand. Then again, you have to see who you have in front of you, because they do a lot of plyometrics in season, even if they don't play that much, because we supplement the lack of game minutes with conditioning and practice. So plyometrics in basketball in season, I think, is a tricky one. Mm-hmm. Unless you have somebody very resilient and that loves to do it and needs to do it. So during the season, I think from a strength perspective, it's more trying to maintain that maximal dynamic strength, remembering through like every 7 or 10 days. It's very, very individual. I'm not saying this for everybody, but speed, power, core, balance every week. And then something that I think is important for those that want to do it, upper body strength for the contact, and feeling good, just feeling good. Like, and feeling good for a player might mean curl biceps and dumbbell press, because they feel good with that. And for some players, it's gonna be barefoot movement in 3 planes with a lot of matrix lunges, body weight exercises, and that's very individual. So whatever feel good means for that player.
I like it. I think that's a good way to finish off. But you mentioned the book. Are you doing another book as well? Are you involved in another project?
Yes.
Okay. Just add another one in there. So where can people get the book that you mentioned, and where can people get the book that you're going to mention, and where can people get in touch with you? The last three.
Yes. So the book that I just mentioned, the editors are Springer. So if they Google the title of the book, you already can purchase it. It's new from this week. That's the first one. The second one, I don't know how official published that is. I think I've seen some tweeters about that in social media. But yes, we have been working for more than 2 years in a book, and hopefully it's out soon, early next year. So I would say early next year, there's going to be a book that a friend of mine and I, Duncan French, we have put a lot of work on it. So we hope that people likes it. It's going to be about sports science. That's the other one. Those are the two books.
Perfect. And where can people get in touch with you? Talk about anything that we've just discussed, research, basketball, whatever it may be. Where's the best place?
Yeah, my only social media thing that I use is Twitter. So through Twitter, I'm not Instagram or other platforms. I think Twitter is the best way to reach to me. And from there, I'm happy to share my email and be in contact with people, as you know, and some of the people that knows me, I'd like to be in contact with them time to time. And so I think Twitter is the easiest way to connect with me.
Do you know your Twitter handle?
The name?
Yes.
Okay, it's Lorena Torres 07.
Okay, I asked that to everyone, and everyone's like, "Oh no, I don't know it." But yeah, good call. Lorena Torres 07. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Lorena, for coming on for a second time. Really do appreciate you giving a bit of time in your day. I know it's busy and manic everywhere, but especially over there. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. I always enjoy talking to you.
Thanks, Lorena. Speak soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.